The meeting will begin in 1 minute. The meeting will begin in 1 minute.
Roll. Okay. Welcome, everybody, and welcome to our Tuesday, May 15th, 2018 informational. This will be my last informational as City Council Chair, and I'd just like to say that I've enjoyed representing the Council over the last year to, well, actually 2 years. First thing that I'd really like to do here this afternoon is welcome our newest members. Once again, congratulations, Councilor Janet Brecky. We welcome you to the council. And Councilor Kurt Sale, welcome to the council and congratulations. And not present is Mayor Paul Ten Akin. We also like to welcome Mayor Ten Akin to the council and look forward to working with him for the next 4 years, next few years and beyond. So anyway, that's having done that. Our first item is business is a report from the Urbanized Development Commission, and it doesn't look like Councilor Walfing walking up to the podium, but rather Jim David, who was so kind to represent us at the UDC meeting. Welcome.
Good afternoon, council members. I've heard I have some pretty big shoes to fill with this report, so I will do my very best. I served as an alternate for the May 10, 2018 Urbanized Development Commission meeting, or what's commonly referred to as the UDC. For those who are not familiar with the UDC, it is a policy-making body of the Sioux Falls Metropolitan Planning Organization, or MPO. And let me just first apologize for the number, or for the amount of acronyms I'm going to say, because there's quite a few when you deal with federal transportation. But an MPO is required under federal law for urbanized areas that are greater than 50,000 persons to coordinate and to govern the federal transportation dollars. The MPO's boundaries, which are seen above in the map here, have Sioux Falls at its core, and then on the west bordered by Hartford, to the east Brandon, to the north Crooks, and to the south both T and Harrisburg. And specifically looking at last week's agenda, the UDC approved a public participation plan for the 2019-2022 Transportation Improvement Plan, or TIP. The participation plan lays out the methods for involving the public in transportation-related projects. The TIP is a document approved each year by the UDC that lays out the planned transportation improvements throughout the MPO. The TIP will be considered or approved by the UDC later this year. The Commission also approved $50,000 for Southeastern Behavioral and $72,000 for Lifescape for ADA compliant vans. Community Coordinated Transportation Systems, or CCTS, received $127,000 for operations. These funds came from FTA grants. And finally, the UDC approved an amendment to the 2040 Long Range Transportation Plan that changed the 85th Street overpass to the 85th Street interchange. Happy to answer your questions.
Thank you, Jim. Councilor Rolfing usually did not include visuals, so yeah. Visual aid, very good. Any questions for Jim? Okay, seeing none, we're going to move on to the next item on our informational meeting, and that is City Council open discussion, and this is our opportunity to bring up any topic that we'd like to discuss among the council. So, Councilor Staley.
Thank you, Council Chair. First of all, I want to say thank you to Councilor Kiley, because you have given us great ability to ask questions. You've been respectful, and I've appreciated the way you've run these meetings. And especially, I've said this publicly, I'll say it again, the way you ran the public input during the icon noise issue was just outstanding. And I know you got lots of accolades from citizens on that. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you very much,
And I know being in leadership takes a lot of extra time, and you always handled it with great responsibility and diligence. The second thing I wanted to say in welcoming our new people here, I know Councilor Greg Neitzer made a kind of a list of things to welcome new people with, and he inspired me to do the same thing. And I wanted to read what I wrote, and I did send this to you, but I wanted to share it with the public. And I started, so Jim, if you could put this up, please, so everybody could see that. And I started, I'll just start reading. Dear Janet, Kurt, and Mayor Paul, and I sent this to the mayor, I wanted to welcome you to the City Council. I remember well my first months of trying to maneuver the material and sort out what was needed and what to let go of. It is an overwhelming experience, and especially so with the added technology stream of information. And then I said I'd certainly be available to help you with anything that I can. And sometimes it's just the mechanics of where this is or that is. And so I've included some words of wisdom. And please forgive my constant reference to God, but I do believe in the Lord, and I think all of us here have also made that a public statement on that. So the first thing I said to new council members, and I'm saying this to all of us and to myself very much, get on your knees frequently and ask God to lead, guide, and inspire your words, decisions, and actions. Number two, don't be afraid to ask questions at the meetings. The questions you ask are likely the questions that the citizens watching on Channel 16 would like answered as well. There have been times that the questions and the discussion before a vote have actually changed my vote. People want to hear the backstory and to know why we are considering projects and ordinances and expenditures. More open information and discussion is always the best practice, in my opinion. Number three, always call citizens back and answer their email requests. This is the most time-consuming part of my job as a city council member, but I believe it is one of the most important responsibilities. I have been able to assist, and I know other council members have as well, and guide many citizens to a positive, satisfying outcome because I was willing to listen to their concerns with a caring heart, and I was willing to help. Sometimes these people just want to know that someone will give them some respectful attention. I always get their concerns documented in an email, and then I send it to the appropriate department. I ask to be included in the follow-up discussions. And I have to give a big accolade to Jim David, our staff person, because he's so helpful in helping to direct these situations and these concerns into the right departments to be addressed. Number four, get on your knees frequently and ask the good Lord for guidance, wisdom, and compassion. Number five, this is a big one, hard to do, I know, but don't become defensive or insulted when a citizen challenges you or may be upset with you. The majority of citizens I work with are deeply appreciative. I have had a few phone calls and emails from people who have disagreed with something I have done. I always call or email them and respectfully respond to them. I have never hung up on a citizen or treated them rudely. Being publicly scrutinized comes with this public position. We need to be prepared to be criticized and to address those concerns being directed at us, and we need to be prepared to do it publicly. Number six, treat your fellow council members with respect at the meeting. Let us strive to disagree without being nasty, scoffing, or attacking at the meeting. And I've said this to my colleagues, I will strive to stand up for your right to speak, and I will also defend the public's right to speak at the meetings as well. During these past 2 years, there have been times when I've had to call a point of order to defend these freedoms of speech. I hope that doesn't have to happen as frequently in this new chapter. Number 7, please respond to fellow council members' emails and phone calls in a timely manner. I have found that it's helpful to have email documentation of events and information for the sake of continuity. It is very disheartening to be told one thing behind the scenes and another at the meeting. Some people call that politics. I call it lack of integrity. Number 8, however, do not be afraid to offer an amendment to something that is brought forth at the meeting. New information may bring on new insight. We are not bound to vote in a certain way. Number 9, get on your knees frequently and ask the good Lord to teach you how to forgive, to love all people, and to serve with humility. Number 10, my last thing, find ways to stay connected to the citizens. You are going to be spending many hours with city staff. You will be hearing their side of a proposal in a very, very powerful way. It is so important to be interacting with the citizens and hearing their feedback. I reach out to citizens if I think something is going to impact them. Case in point, we had a Matt Metzger annexation issue, and that whole small incident with the citizen turned into the annexation task force. I personally go to the Benson's flea market each year, and I have invited the council to join me there. I also engage citizens on Facebook. I talk to the media. I try to keep people connected to what's happening. Councilor Greg Neitsert and I hosted a Hy-Vee get-together, and it was a wonderful experience. I'm always game to join up with the council in public outreach venues, and I hope we can do more of that. It's a win-win for our community. And the last thing, once again, I said, and by the way, I do this myself, get on your knees and thank God for the opportunity to help the citizens and make Sioux Falls a better place for all. And I am hoping for a new chapter, a new era in openness, transparency, and service for our citizens, because in my opinion, that's what it's all about. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Any other items for open discussion this afternoon? Okay, thank you. Seeing none, we're going to go ahead with our first presentation, which is our April monthly financial report by Tracy Turbach, Director of Finance. Tracy, welcome.
Good afternoon, councilors, and let me add my welcome as well to Councilor Brecky and Councilor Sale. Look forward, although it will be a short time that I have here while you're in office, do look forward to working with you in my time that does remain. And welcome back, Councilor Erickson and Councilor Kiley. All right, with that, I will jump into my April monthly financial report. And typically we go over economic indicators that we do track. First of all, unemployment. Again, employment continues as it has for quite some time now to be very strong in the Sioux Falls MSA. The most recent unemployment figures are 3.1%. That's exactly where we ended last calendar year. And we have seen improvements as well in the state and national rates over the last couple of months as well. So again, continuing very good employment picture here in Sioux Falls. This graphic shows the building permits, or the value of building permits that are issued over the last several years. Year to date through April of 2018, the Building Services Department has issued almost $225 million in building permits. That is ahead of last year at this point, and slightly behind where we were 2 years ago. So again, a very, very good year starting out in terms of the construction activity here in Sioux Falls. So another good economic indicator here. Sales taxes. This has been the one kind of point of concern, I would say, over the last couple of years, is the growth in our sales tax revenues. This graphic shows the year-over-year growth rate across a 2-year time frame. You can see most recently, for the last 12 months, we've grown at 2.9%. A year ago, that 12-month rate was at 1.9%. So we've seen a nice increase in that, I'll call it. We did base our 2018 budget on 1% growth, so that's a good position for us to be in, I guess, at this stage in the year, where we're running at 2.9%. So you can see it's ticked up fairly steadily over the last 4 or 5 months. The last 8 months actually have been markedly different, markedly improved over the, well, I would say a year and a half almost prior to that. So we're certainly encouraged by that. I guess time will tell if that's really a sustaining trend or if it's just a blip on the chart. So we'll certainly hope for the former. We also look at the entertainment tax collections. It's kind of a gauge from my perspective anyway on discretionary dollars in the local economy, because that tax applies to eating out, alcoholic beverages, motel room rentals, that kind of thing. And we can see that over the same 2-year time frame has also been on generally a downward trend, although most recently, since the first of the year, we can see it's picked up some, and over the last 12 months has now grown at 2.7% over the prior year. So again, encouraging, certainly not robust, not the kind of sales tax growth or entertainment tax growth that we had become accustomed to or over the long term that we have seen, but certainly heading in the right direction after quite a flat spell there. Last, I'll take a quick look at the general fund revenue and expenses year to date. The graphic on the left reflects the revenue on a year-to-date basis compared to 2017. Through April of this year, the general fund has recognized $36 million in revenue. That's 23% of our budgeted revenue for the year. On a percentage basis, that puts us just slightly ahead of where we've been the last couple of years. That's partly due, of course, to the sales tax growing at a better pace, and then also some accelerated property tax revenues that we've seen early in this year. Last year at this point, through April, we had $34.4 million in general fund revenues. Looking at the expenditure side, expenditures continue to track pretty much in line with budget year to date. We've expended $45.7 million of the general fund budget. That's about 28%. That's just slightly ahead of where we were the last couple of years. And as I mentioned last month in my report, the one area of concern or of interest to you folks will be the snow removal budget that is running high. No surprise to anybody that we had a tremendous amount of snow after the first of the year. And it's the snow removal expenditures are running about 27% ahead of where we were last year. We've actually expended over 80% of our snow removal budget for the entire year through the end of April. So that will certainly be a point of further discussion in the coming weeks, and certainly my expectation is that it would be very likely that before the end of the year that snow removal budget will need to be supplemented at some point. We've got about $1.4 million remaining out of about a $7.4 million budget or so for snow removal. And just our fixed cost will eat through that $1.4 million during the remainder of the year before the end of December. So I know that the Public Works team does plan to get on an informational agenda here in the near future to kind of recap the snow removal season, the winter season, provide you kind of some statistics and kind of what they're hoping to see happen for the remainder of the year. So you'll get briefed on that here in the near future. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you folks have.
Thank you, Director. Questions for Director Turban? Councilor Staley?
Snow removal, for our new people here, and to refresh our minds, what is that budget usually?
The total budget for this year is about $7.5 million for snow removal. And like I say, we've about $1.4 million remaining as of the end of April.
Spent $6 million already. Mm-hmm. And then where are we at? And of course, they weren't involved with this discussion when we had that excess money that we paid some of the debt down with, and then we put some into reserves. Did that just go right into the general fund? Wasn't like $1.5 million?
Councilor, you're referring to the surplus capital dollars that remained unspent at the end of 2017. Those do not go into the general fund because they are capital second penny dollars. They remain in that second penny sales tax fund. So they are remain in that budget or in that fund as unappropriated dollars at this point.
So is there a way that those dollars could help the snow removal, like when we're talking about repairs or machinery? Because we talk about the 7.5 million that you mentioned, that's operational cost, correct?
That's correct.
So what about, what does it cost with just the buying machinery? I mean, I would think just to have that physical presence, there's a monetary amount too.
Yeah, and those are rolled into the operational budget on they're referred to as rentals. The fleet department buys the equipment, and then they're rented out, in essence, to Public Works. But that really, the overall rental budget is about $1.3 million. Most of that has been expended already. So I would say it's slightly problematic to use capital dollars to try to find a way to help the general fund budget. So I think the more appropriate response would be to first of all, to manage the remainder, what remains in the street department budget. Snow removal is only one part of that, to help offset costs for snow removal. So if they can find savings in the rest of their budget, that ought to be the first thing we look at. Within reason, of course, we don't want to stop filling potholes or fixing the streets and maintaining the streets. But after that, heavy snow removal year, that's one of the prime reasons we maintain a reserve in our general fund, is to pick up the slack when we do have a year like we've seen this first 4 months of this year. So that would be probably the more appropriate approach.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you very much, Tracy. Good job.
Thank you.
And it's been a joy working with you here too as well, and I wish you the best of luck here in the future, as this is most likely going to be your last report to the council.
That's right.
That is it. Well, thank you very much, Tracy. Your service has been very valuable to the citizens of Sioux Falls. Wish you the best of luck. All right, the next item on the agenda is our audit report, 17-08, motor vehicle fee revenue. And Ashley Vandenberg, our internal auditor, will do the presentation. Welcome.
Thank you. Okay, good afternoon, councilors. The purpose of this audit was to determine if the city received the proper distribution of motor vehicle revenue. The audit was requested by finance, as they were concerned that recent changes to state laws regarding motor vehicle fees did not coincide with the amount of revenue they projected to receive. For a little bit of background information, motor vehicle fees are established by state law and are to be used for the construction and maintenance of highways, streets, and bridges. State law requires that every owner of a motor vehicle must pay an annual license or registration fee to the county treasurer in which they reside. The fees collected are then distributed to the state and local government entities based on percentages set forth in South Dakota state laws. The percentages are shown in the table on page 2. The laws regarding the apportionment of the funds are somewhat complex, but the city of Sioux Falls should ultimately receive a portion of motor vehicle funds from Minnehaha County, Lincoln County, and the state on a quarterly basis. The chart on page 3 illustrates the amount of funds the city received from each of those entities during 2014 to 2017. In total, the city receives about 2.7 to 2.9 million a year in motor vehicle revenue. The objectives of this audit were to determine if any recent changes have been made to state law and how those changes will affect the amount of motor vehicle revenue the city receives, to determine if the city is receiving the proper amount of motor vehicle revenue from Minnehaha County, Lincoln County, and the state, to determine if the city is properly recording and reporting motor vehicle revenue, and to determine if finance has proper controls in place to make sure the city is receiving the correct amount of revenue each year. The scope of this audit included a review of motor vehicle revenue received during 2014 through 2017. We determined that, or for the results of the audit, we determined that changes were made in 2015 and 2016 to state laws applicable to motor vehicle registrations. On page 5, we noted those changes and explained how they would affect the amount of motor vehicle funds the city should expect to receive during the time frame the changes took effect. Based on our analysis, we determined that the city did receive motor vehicle revenue consistent with the changes in legislation. However, due to the city's misinterpretation of the changes to the state laws, the city over budgeted for motor vehicle revenue by approximately $500,000 in both 2016 and 2017. We noted that they reduced the 2018 budget, but our analysis and estimated projections suggest that the city will still be over budget in 2018. We included audit recommendation 1 to address this issue, which is shown on the bottom of page 7. For that recommendation, we recommended that in preparation of the 2019 budget, management should take into consideration the analysis performed by internal audit over motor vehicle license revenue and how changes to legislation will affect the amount the city will receive in future years. Management agreed with the recommendation and stated that they now have a much clearer picture of how the changes to state laws impacted the amount the city receives, and they will take that into account for future budgets. And back to page 6, for the distribution of motor vehicle funds, we tested a sample of payments received from Minnehaha County, Lincoln County, and the state, and determined that the amounts apportioned to the city were properly calculated. We reviewed the amounts recorded and reported during 2014 to 2017 and determined that the amounts reported were materially accurate to the financial statements. However, we included audit recommendation 2 on page 8 to address the insignificant reporting errors that were noted. For that recommendation, we recommended that management update the procedure document that's used by staff to assist in the recording of motor vehicle revenue to make sure they are recorded and reported properly. This document should be reviewed regularly for updates and accuracy. We also recommended that staff be properly trained to ensure year-end accrual entries are completed accurately. Management responded that they fully agreed and have taken steps to strengthen controls and procedures to ensure amounts are recorded to the correct general ledger account. And now for the results of our last objective on page 7. Under the internal controls section, we determined that the city does have the proper controls in place to ensure they're receiving the correct amount of motor vehicle revenue. Their budget process and continuous monitoring of these funds will help them identify any significant variances. To conclude, our audit provides assurance that the recent changes in state law affecting motor vehicle fees were properly reflected in the amounts the city received from 2014 through 2017, and we determined that the city is receiving motor vehicle fee distributions in accordance with state law. So that concludes the presentation of this report. Does anyone have questions or comments?
Thank you much, Ms. Vandenberg. Good job. Okay, Councilor Neitzer.
Thank you. How often does the city, are they remitted these fees? Does it come monthly, yearly?
Quarterly.
Quarterly?
Yep, we get quarterly payments from Minnehaha County and Lincoln County and the state.
And then for the next budget year, at the time that we're doing our budget, is it, do we have visibility as to how much will be coming in, or do you have to just take a stab at how many cars you think will be registered based on historical trends, or how does somebody come up with that?
I think it's mostly based on historical trends. Yeah, they wouldn't know ahead of time.
Okay, fair enough, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Councilor Staley?
First of all, just for the giving this to the public, if we're looking on page 2, am I right then that if I was to say to a citizen that 5% of what they're paying for their motor vehicle licensing is coming back to the city?
The 5% comes back to all municipalities within our county. So within Minnehaha County, then that 5% of funds is a portion based on each city's, the total number of roads they have in respect to all of the cities. Does that make sense?
I understand.
Okay.
But if I was to say to John Doe, he's paying $70 to get his car licensed, and to say what percentage of that $70 is going back to municipalities in general? then I could say 5%.
Yes.
And then when you say other, what are we talking about with that?
There's a few of those that go to, I believe it was a couple of the state funds, like statewide funds, so they're funds for South Dakota. I don't know. I can get that information to you. It's in my work papers.
But is that the part that the state's keeping for itself? I mean,
Correct.
they're keeping,
Yep.
so
The state gets that piece.
that could say state instead of other, right? Because it's,
Yeah, there's a few state funds. I don't know if it was anything other than state, but
in addition to them getting the
I can
highway.
provide
The
you
highway
with the
fund is
exact-
for the state too.
correct.
And then, am I correct in, you said between 2.7 and 2.9 million is coming back into the Sioux Falls coffers, correct?
Yes.
And then, when you're doing this audit, you were actually auditing the state then? Am I hearing that? That you were to see that they were giving us the funds back? You're doing an oversight for what the state is doing, is that correct?
We audited the counties because the county collects the funds and they remit it back to the city.
Oh, okay, so it's the states, you were never addressing what they were giving us back?
Not directly. There's the portion of local government, highway and bridge funds that, though, there's a piece of that that is sent to the state and then it goes back to the counties. And then they remit it to all the taxing subdistricts. It's very cumbersome, actually.
So you were somewhat you were kind of auditing the
There's
county?
a little bit of it, yes.
The county treasurer's office.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Sale, did you have a question? Okay, Councilor Starr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess a couple of parts of the recommendations. In recommendation 1, as part of management's response, they said they asked for the information but didn't get it from the state. Who did they request it from at the state that didn't respond?
That would be Tracy.
You're really going to test my memory back to 2015. Yeah, I don't recall specifically how that communication took place. We did have information in our files that gave us a breakdown of how the new revenues were supposed to be distributed. And based on that is how and initially after July of 15, we did see an increase in the very next quarterly payment. So it was pretty clear that we were recognizing some of that additional revenue. But what wasn't clear at the time was some of the other revenues generated from that 20% increase in fees that wasn't going to be coming back to the city. So bottom line for me, I guess, in this audit report is on the very first graphic there where it shows that in 14 the city collected almost $2.8 million, and in 2017 we received less in motor vehicle fees. And that's after there was a 20% increase to car owners in that interim. And so you think about that and how much Sioux Falls has grown from 2014 to 2017 with a 20% rate increase built in there. It has not turned out to be a really good deal for the city of Sioux Falls and our ability to fund our street maintenance program. So I would offer that as something maybe for the council to take a look at. I don't know who is going to be the liaison with the municipal league going forward, but that's certainly something that I would bring to their attention. I don't know what the expectation was from a statewide basis, what cities and counties might expect to see out of that. But we certainly expected to see an increase, not a decrease.
Well, I guess that's what was interesting at that time. I mean, it was a record tax increase that the legislature passed as part of, to fund roads and bridges across the state. And if we're spending less on a local basis on that match, I guess that's concerning. The other kind of follow-up, if I can, Mr. Chair, just a little bit, was that we were able to share some of the information that we got from the state. How did we communicate that to other communities around the state of how this works and help out in that information?
Well,
were you able, municipal league?
My first step would be the municipal league. Yeah, they're kind of the conduit for all things city.
Perfect. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Just, if I can, one more comment. To be
And
fair,
Director.
some of those dollars that were generated, additional dollars from some of the increases at the state level, did go into a grant program, and some of those dollars are getting granted out to, that it could go to the cities and counties. It's predominantly been used for, as I understand it from the information I have, for replacing county culverts in a lot of counties around the state. So, you know, put those two together and you can kind of figure out where the additional money that Sioux Falls residents are paying, where those dollars are going. Now, the city of Sioux Falls is eligible for that grant program, but based on the way it's structured, it really hasn't been very conducive or compatible with our program, our plans, and how our Public Works Department manages their budget. So they continue to look at it and urge the state to revise that grant program so that it would be more conducive to Sioux Falls actually competing and getting some of those grant dollars, but it remains to be seen if any changes will be made in that program.
If I can, Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, I
Go
want
ahead.
to follow up a little bit from that. Then how do we get a chance to look at where the grant funds are distributed versus where they, again, that's probably a little more subjective, but was that something that we looked at as part of this audit? Or it talks about in the report that we have controls in place, but it doesn't give me a lot of background of what those controls are. How do we, who's responsible in Public Works to make sure that we're managing the amount of grants that we're receiving and that we're getting our fair share?
Yeah, we didn't look at the grant fund specifically because, yeah, that's outside the scope of this audit.
But it talked about that this was that the controls were in place, so I guess I'm trying to figure out what the controls
Yeah,
are
and
to
they
make sure
are.
we do that.
The city was aware that through their budgeting process, they were aware that we weren't receiving what they expected initially. And now after seeing the results of this audit and our conclusions, they're aware that now they missed a small piece of how the law changed to where a section of the 20% increase in fees, portion of those funds got diverted to a new fund that the state created for grant improvement or bridge improvement grant funds. And so that chunk is now what we are losing out on. And they weren't aware of
You
how.
pass a record tax increase and it costs
Right.
the city of Sioux Falls money. I mean, that's the thing that I guess is the overall part that I'm getting from this report, but I'm still struggling to see who, I want to make sure that someone's following up on the grant procedure and that are watching that. So I guess I'm trying to figure out who specifically is responsible for that action item.
And that might be more on the statewide side because they're the ones that manage the grant fund.
Right, but someone from the city has to be, whether someone from Public Works has to be taking a look at this and saying, we didn't get our fair share. I know this has been a point of contention for the county that they missed out on some funding for bridges that in Minnehaha County that they considered suing the state to get their share because they didn't follow their own guidelines. So I know the county's highway department follows that. I'm just trying to get to the point of who follows it on a city basis that makes that determination whether we do get our share or we don't. And so we did the audit. Where's the response as part of the audit?
Yeah, I hope I didn't confuse matters. Yeah, the grant, it is a state grant program. It is a competitive program, so there's nothing automatic about it. You've got to compete with local governments from all over the state. And that's what I was referring to. The structure of it would tend to favor other communities, smaller entities, counties. Public Works Department and Finance Department are both well aware of the program, well aware of the requirements and the kind of the structure. That's why I say the state is being encouraged to revise that by city staff, but that only carries so much weight.
I get it. It's a competitive process. I'm just, like I said, this talks about controls and doing it. And I'm just trying to say, okay, we're doing it, or who's responsible for doing it. And I got my answer, I guess. Thank you.
Any other question? Councilor Selbert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the report. So in a nutshell, this is probably way oversimplified, but any discrepancies found in this report were all a result of a misinterpretation of new state laws,
Yeah.
and that's being corrected now
Yep.
or has been corrected.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion? Okay, seeing none, just want to remind everybody that there is not a land use committee meeting following the informational. So we will be adjourning. When we do adjourn, it'll be until the 7 o'clock meeting this evening. So everybody have what's left of the afternoon. Have a good afternoon, and we'll see you back at 7. This meeting is adjourned.